Today I'm going to go through how to make a hand dredge. It's really handy for using when you're crevicing or when you're out gold panning, and even when you're using a little sluice or concentrator. It's just good to be able to empty out the bottom little bit of gravel that's in your holes and stuff. So I'll go through what it is today. Okay, the parts you're going to need is some washers. We need 3 40mm washers, and the inside diameter will just do whatever sort of threaded rod that you're going to choose to use for the handle and for the stick that is the plunger. So I'll tell you the outside diameters, but the inside diameter will just have to correspond with whatever threaded rod you choose to use. So you'll need 3 of those 40mm washers. You'll need 1 small 15mm washer. And I've got 2 spring washers just to keep the nuts firm. And then you're going to need 3 nuts, and again just get whatever size that you're going to be using for your handle and your threaded rod, so just make sure whatever nuts you're using are corresponding with that. I'm using a 1/4 inch or 6mm threaded rod, and you'll need 1 cap nut or blind nut, some people call them. So that's all the little hardware you're going to need. The other piece that you're going to need is a big rubber washer. Now you can buy them pre-made from the hardware store, or you can cut them yourself. I choose to cut them myself out of a piece of rubber. I've used an old mud flap off my car, and it's just a bit stiffer rubber. Now the size that it has to be is the size of the main pipe that we're going to be using for the hand dredge. Now I'm using a 50mm piece of PVC piping that's 50 centimetres long. So the rubber washer that I've made is slightly bigger than the 50mm. So I've made this 51mm, just enough that it's going to be really good suction and a little bit hard to use at start, but once you use it a little bit and you've had a bit of gravel come and go through your hand dredge, it'll seat itself in and wear down to be the perfect size anyway. So you need a rubber washer as well. You're going to need a 50mm push-on cap, and that goes onto your piece of PVC pipe that we've already talked about. You're going to need a little piece of foam, handlebar foam or pool noodle foam. That's going to help with the suction. And also, we're going to need a piece of 15 to 25mm PVC vinyl tubing. Now, it's fairly flexible, but it's still stiff enough to hold its shape and to cop a bit of damage and a bit of roughness. So I've chose to use a 25cm piece that I'm actually using today. And the last bit you're going to need is a little piece of wood. I've used a 1-inch piece of dowel. It's 10 centimetres long, but this is just for the handle. So you can choose to make whatever you like, but I'm choosing to use a little piece of 1-inch dowel. Now the next thing that we're going to need to go through is what tools you're going to need for this. I'm not going to actually cut up the material. I've already pre-bought my piece of PVC piping at the length I need, but you may need a saw if you've got a longer piece of PVC, or if you don't buy your threaded rod at the correct length. So those things you need to keep in mind. But other than that, you're going to need a pair of scissors to be able to cut down your PVC vinyl tubing, and you're going to need a drill to be able to drill into your handle. And you just need to be able to drill a hole just like with the sizes of the washers and the nuts that just correspond to your threaded rod. So it's going to be able to fit in there nicely. So really, you just need a drill, some scissors, and if you don't have a lot of drill bits and you're going to go out and get a drill bit, for the hole that you're going to need to drill in the end of this push-on end cap, you can either get a 1-inch drill bit, or you can also get a 1-inch little hole saw. I've had a hole saw at home, so that's what I've used, and you just drill from one side and then from the other side. anyhow, that's all the parts you're going to need. I'm going to go through now what you need to go, the steps to construct. Okay, so I'm going to go through and assemble the hand dredge. As I said, I haven't had to cut down my piece of pipe, so I'm already organised there, and I've cut down my tubing to the size, and I've also pre-drilled this push-on cap and my handle. I'm not, as I said, I'm not going to do any of the sawing or the drilling or anything like that. I'm just going to show you the parts you need, and as I said, you can slightly vary all these things, but it's just the general principle, and if you buy all these exact parts, you'll have a really good hand dredge. So, as I said, you're going to need to drill a hole, a 1-inch hole in the centre of this, and once you've done that, you're going to grab your tubing, and sometimes you need to put in a little bit of hot water to soften up, but I just force mine through, and what you end up is with a little cap and a piece of tube like this. Now you can see it's protruding through both sides, and initially that'll be in there nice and firmly, but over time and being out in the sun and heat and bashing around in crevices, it will loosen up. So I put a bit of preventative silicone around the outside just to toughen it up. So that is going to be the tip of our suction nozzle for our hand dredge. So, assembly of the actual main part of the hand dredge is your PVC pipe. Now you've got your tip that you've just made. Now all you do, I'll do it on this end, all you do is twist this on firmly. You can use some PVC glue to put it on, but I find that I like to be able to get it off if I need to, so I just twist it on itself. So that's the main housing and the tip of your hand dredge. I'm going to set that to the side and we'll go through making the plunger, which is the main mechanism that actually causes the suction and helps you suck up all the gold and gravel into the main shank of your hand dredge, and you're able to then pull out the plunger and tip it into your gold pan. So we'll go through this. Now you've got your threaded rod. Now I've made this the same length as the actual hand dredge, but you've got to remember that you've got a bit of tubing inside of here. So you're going to have a little bit of space where you don't want to be jamming down on that all the time. So you've got to be conscious of that when you're using it. But start with this threaded rod. Now what you want to do is first put on a nut. I'll thread this on. You want to thread on a good distance to start with. So I've got that about 15 to 17 centimetres down the threaded rod there, and then I grab one of these 40mm washers. I'm going to put that on there. Now I'm going to follow by my pool noodle or foam handed bar grip, whatever you've got around. That it's just got to be something that's very similar to the same size as your inside diameter of this PVC pipe. So mine's 50mm here, so this is about 45 to 48mm. It doesn't have to be exact, you still want it to be able to have a little bit of air to pass around it, but it just really helps with the mechanism of the suction. So we put that piece of foam on there, so now you've got the foam sitting on a washer and a nut, and we're going to follow that up with one more washer. Actually, sorry, we're going to follow that up with a nut first, and then that washer. Now after that, we're going to put on our rubber washer we made, or we've used our pre-bought one from the plumbing shop. That goes just on the end like that. Then we have the last washer going on the end there. Now I put a little spring washer on there just to keep tension. And then the last cap nut goes on the end. So I tighten up the cap nut, and it's a matter of turning it upside down and tightening up the nuts so everything's firm. Now you can go and use a shifter and a spanner to tighten these up properly, but I'm just going to do it by hand to show you. Then we let it all drop down, the foam over the washer and the nut here, and then just tighten up that bottom nut. Now that's nice and firm. The rubber washers on there nice and tightly, and those 40mm washers are holding them tightly. Now the last piece we need to do is actually just make the handle on top so we've got something nice to grip. Now I've pre-drilled this little piece of dowel. Now what you want to do is drill a hole, and if you want to get a little bit fancy about it, I've countersunk it on one side and then I've put a nut into it. So this will stop the handle from twisting around and spinning on the handle, so that's really going to help me out and not frustrate me when I'm out in the field trying to use my hand dredge. But to start with, we're going to put on this little washer, this nut, followed by the spring washer. And then we're going to put on that little 15mm washer, followed by the handle. So we just wiggle the handle onto there, and then you can see the threaded rod's coming into that nut that we've countersunk into the handle. So we'll just wind that on until it's just about through, and then we're going to tighten up this nut. And once again, I'm just going to do it hand tight, but you really want to get a shifter or a spanner onto that. But that's now your plunger complete. So the way it works is just this main rubber washer is what's causing the main suction, but this piece of foam helps to push all the air and helps this rubber washer create that suction a little bit easier. So then the last thing to do is to stick it into the housing of your hand dredge. Now as I said, with this, mine's a little bit bigger, so it's just a little bit stiff to start with to stick it in there. And there we go. That's your hand dredge. Now all you've got to do when you're out in the field is stick it in your hole or your crevice, and then it's just a matter of sucking it up, tipping it upside down and tipping it into your gold pan. So for about $20 you can make one of these yourself, and if you have half the parts sitting around at home you might be able to do it for cheaper, but it's a really handy thing to have, and I recommend everybody make one of these themselves. But I love going gold panning, and it's really frustrating when you spend all this time digging to the bottom of a hole or a crevice and you can't quite get the last little handful of gravel and gold, and all the heavies and all the good stuff will be sitting at the bottom of that hole. So this solves that problem. Once again, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.